Welcome back to the Bird's Eye View. I'm the War Duck, and I am here with the lovely Mr. Crow, who
Hello, everybody.
tried to come save my ass on vacation and
But
paid
failed.
for it with a nail in his tire.
But yeah, you had an experience. My goodness,
But it was good to actually
was
meet you.
crazy.
That was pretty cool.
Oh, yeah.
So
That was great. That was awesome. Had a blast.
Meanwhile, while we were out gallivanting around and having fun, the Supreme Court made some decisions. And this point of view, or this video here, is about the Supreme Court and your gun rights and what happened to your gun rights and why it's important and everything. So we'll just start with this particular The opposing headline is the Supreme Court gun ruling is the triumph of conservatives over common sense gun laws, of course, or common sense. And the thing about that is there's no such thing as common sense gun laws. There is. It's all about control. Like and it's government control, right? Any law saying that you can't possess something is government control. They fear what you might do with that gun against the government or whatever, or other people or whatever. So that's really what it's about. Okay. So, the Supreme Court ruled against New York and said that their concealed permit gun law is unconstitutional. And the reason they said it was unconstitutional is because it was an arbitrary reasoning for doling out that concealed gun license. If you are a Joe Schmo average guy, you are not getting one regardless of what your excuse is. Period.
So, I guess, is my background, because I'm kind of blind to this. So, what's the process of getting a concealed weapons permit in New York?
So you have to apply, you have to pay the money, and then they tell you no. That's what it was.
Apply.
Yeah, you have to apply. You have to furnish them all the information and paperwork, and then you have to pay them money. And then they tell you no,
Okay.
regardless of what reasoning is. Unless you're famous or you're a judge or you're politically tied or whatever.
Yeah, okay. That definitely does not seem right.
If you're Joe Schmo, then you ain't getting one ever. And that's what this was about.
So you couldn't get a concealed weapons permit.
Correct.
Okay.
So in this ruling, though, the Supreme Court justices came down and said, hey, you can't use, because all these lower courts were using these other types of reasoning behind how they made their decisions, right? And that's why it got to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court was like, hey, wait a minute. For one, you have to use historical context for this law. And two, you have to use strict scrutiny because you're talking about a constitutional right and you're talking about restricting somebody's constitutional right. So under strict scrutiny, this reasoning failed and they lost this case. Now, as a non-lawyer, I was like, hey, what the hell is strict scrutiny? Well,
yeah.
I did a whole bunch of research to try to figure this out, and I kept running into articles that basically were still above my head, and I just didn't understand. So there's 3 levels of scrutiny that the Supreme Court uses. I forgot what the lowest one's called. And then it's intermediate scrutiny and strict scrutiny. And they've been usually using intermediate scrutiny. And the Supreme Court basically said that that's not enough. You have to use strict scrutiny when you're talking about restricting somebody's rights. And so...
Okay.
And so,
That kinda makes sense.
so I did find a video explaining strict scrutiny. So we're going to watch that because it's very important to know how this works and why it works the way it does. So this video, which of course I'll put the link in the description, this talks about, in layman's terms, so we can understand it, what strict scrutiny is. So, here we go. Oh, no, okay.
The court is trying to answer the question, is a law constitutional or not? For each test, the court is basically asking two questions, or we can say the court is applying two factors. Our first factor is, why did the government pass the law? Was the law for a legitimate purpose? Was the law for an important government purpose? Or was the law for a compelling purpose? It's easiest to show that a law was necessary for a legitimate purpose. It's much harder to show the law was needed for an important purpose, and it's most difficult to show that a law was necessary for a compelling government purpose.
Okay. So, the three types that you're talking about are rational basis, intermediate scrutiny, and strict scrutiny. And so, so what he was saying here is that when the court looks at a law, it looks at they've been looking at the intermediate, the important purpose. Was this law created for an important purpose? And of course, the government says, oh, yeah, it's a gun law. It's for an important purpose. And the Supreme Court said, no, it needs to be a compelling purpose. All right. So the next part of strict scrutiny.
With a rational basis test, we only ask whether the law had a legitimate purpose. The intermediate scrutiny test is significantly more challenging than the rational basis test because now the government must show that the law had an important purpose. The strict scrutiny test is most challenging for the government because the government must demonstrate that the law was necessary for a compelling purpose. The second factor that courts apply is, what are the methods that the law uses to achieve the government purpose? Is there a rational relationship between the methods and the purpose? More challenging, is there a substantial relationship between the methods used by the law and the purpose the law is intended to achieve? And finally, most challenging, is the law narrowly tailored? Is it the least restrictive way that the government can use to achieve its purpose?
Okay. So, under strict scrutiny, this says that the law must be narrowly tailored and least restrictive. So if there's another way to accomplish this without this law is deemed unconstitutional. And that's what happened in this particular case. So, this case was about them getting you getting a concealed gun license, and they put all these barriers to regular Joe Schmo getting this, which is your constitutional right according to the Supreme Court. And so by this law not being narrowly tailored and least restrictive, it violated the Constitution. And so so what they also said is any of these Second Amendment laws that you have been trying to pass must go through strict scrutiny. If they don't, then it was ruled incorrectly. And so this is very important because it is very rare that the government creates a law that passes strict scrutiny. So, I mean, one of the few times it's been that was a non-First Amendment case was when the United States did the Japanese internment camps during World War II. This law was brought to case, and it was ruled under strict scrutiny, but it was actually allowed because of the situation that we were in. There was no other restrictive way to limit the ability of a Japanese descendant to do harm to the United States. They just weren't sure what was happening. So that was allowed to go through. Most of these cases are done on First Amendment cases. So what that means for you individually is the next time. So okay, currently they just passed in Congress and the Senate or whatever, that they just passed a bunch of gun laws, right? The only problem is it is unlikely that what they have passed will get through strict scrutiny, because they're not narrowly tailored, and they're super unlikely to be the least restrictive manner. So, but we'll have to wait and see on that. But it just opened up a bunch of other cases that, like the magazine ban, the high capacity magazine bans, and that kind of stuff. That all is basically thrown out now and have to go through strict scrutiny, and they'll have to be looked at again for historical context. Because again, New York was like, well, since we just lost this case, we're just going to ban them off subways and ban them off the streets and ban them off the parks and ban them off there. But the Supreme Court judges were like, yeah, you can't do that because it has to have historical context.
Interesting. Okay.
So you can't just
cool.
say a park is now a gun-free safe zone. You can't create that law because it's not a historical context that parks, you couldn't have or bear arms in a park.
Prior, yeah.
So therefore, those laws will be deemed at some point unconstitutional if they're carried or if they're passed or if they continue. Now, this goes farther. So the Supreme Court is sending a whole bunch of cases back to the lower courts because of this ruling that they did. And basically what this means, what it was about was the courts were using a two-step rationalization to evaluate the Second Amendment cases that for the last 14 years, they were ordered to sidestep the Heller decision, the original 2A that gave you the right to carry and do all that. So all those have to be sent back down to the court because they say you can't use this two-step rationalization. That's not going to work.
Approach.
Right.
Yeah.
So
they're
now
basically making them all go through it again.
Yeah, they're basically sending it back down and saying that you used the wrong decision-making process to go through this, and so now that you have to go back and rehear and rethink about these cases using the current method that we've deemed for you, and that's where it's even more important because you have a Hawaii case about the ban on open carry. You have a Maryland case about assault weapons ban. You have a New Jersey case about high-capacity magazine. You have a California high-capacity magazine case. And so all these now have to be reheard. And, well, I don't know if they'll rehear them or they'll just go back and use the correct manner of historical context and that kind of stuff, and strict scrutiny and everything that goes with it. So this Bruen case provides clear guidance to lower courts of how to evaluate these cases. And so this will open up even more because basically all of these other cases are now unconstitutional basically once they're ruled like they're supposed to be. Now, another case
job security.
Huh?
I'm hearing job security. A whole bunch of people just got some job security work thrown at them now. They have to do a whole lot of work right now.
So another case that the Supreme Court ruled on that may or may not you may or may not be familiar with. In an opinion that shuts down Chevron deference, the court rejects the Medicare cut for hospital drugs. So this doesn't directly affect gun rights in the case, but it does affect gun rights once we get into this a little bit more. So this case basically said that these people are allowed to buy Medicare drugs at a lower cost at these 340B drug prices at these hospitals that participate in this program, right? And so because they can purchase drugs at a lower cost, the government says, well, because of that, we're going to reimburse you at a lower cost. And the hospitals came back and said, yeah, you can't do that. That's not right. So this drug case basically says that the government can't restrict the reimbursement based on what they said because they interpreted some rule some way. And Chevron deference is basically that gave the agency the right to make that interpretation and change the rules, right? But with them ruling in favor of the hospitals and basically ignoring Chevron deference, what they've said is that the government doesn't have the right to just interpret a rule that benefits them and make it so.
I like that.
If the government interprets a rule, that rule must side with the people that rule is against or whatever, right? So it must side in favor of the people instead of in favor of the government.
Interesting. All right.
And it can't be more.
In theory, this sounds great.
Right. So how this ties to gun laws and stuff? The ATF is busy making up all these rules and interpretations and saying, oh, you know what? A silencer is not a machine gun, so it's banned. Oh, a bump stock is now a machine gun, it's banned. Oh, whatever, we want to make up this rule, and then now whatever gun parts or the 80%ers those are all banned now, right? Because they're machine guns.
Yeah.
Well, the problem is they're interpreting this rule in favor of themselves. What this Supreme Court case says now is the government or the agency can't do that.
Interesting.
The agency must rule in a way, or the interpretation must be in a way that favors the people. So therefore, the ATF will not be able to just say, hey, a silencer is a machine gun, because that doesn't benefit the people.
Yeah.
So that's how this case indirectly ties back to your gun rights and opens your gun rights back up. So basically, the ATF, because of Joe Biden's executive orders and stuff, will now be null and void once they go through cases because they are making these interpretation based on Chevron deference. And the Supreme Court says, no, you can't use Chevron deference to make these kind of interpretations against the people to restrict people's rights and stuff like that.
Interesting. Okay.
So now you have this one major case, and then this other minor case from the Supreme Court has busted gun rights wide open in favor of the people.
Wow.
Now, going back to the original headline is, commons. It's a triumph of conservatives over common sense. It's like, okay, here's the thing: is the Supreme Court never said that you can't require people to have a concealed gun license to carry in your city, right? Yeah. They're not saying you can't use an application process and require some type of certification to have a concealed gun license.
Yeah.
What the ruling was saying was you can't just arbitrarily, because they're not famous or whatever, just tell people no for whatever reason, right? People have the right to carry a gun for self-defense.
Yes.
This is now the second opinion from the Supreme Court that's bolstering your right to carry a gun.
Yeah.
And that's the whole thing well, I didn't. Okay, so there was recently a shooting in Buffalo, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, guess what? New York has some of the strictest gun laws in the nation. And you still have people doing shootings and stuff, right? Because there's no such thing as common sense hate, right? You can't regulate hate, and that's the real problem. So the Democrats have been trying to basically restrict your rights and use it as control. And that's kind of this whole thing is now what they want to do is they want to make a tax on weapons that you buy, right? Okay, well, who does that impact? Does that impact the white rich folks in Congress? That they have to pay extra money for the gun that they own? No.
They don't care.
They don't care, right? It impacts the lower income folks and restricts their right to protect themselves and restricts their right to keep and bear arms. So in the end, that law will become unconstitutional because you can't do that. But here's the real problem is now what they're trying to do is they're trying to switch it and use the abortion ruling against guns. Because what they're trying to do now is like they did, I think it was in California or Texas, I'm not exactly sure, but basically it was the government is not enforcing these rules, but the government says that if your neighbor sees you in the process or doing something to help somebody have an abortion, you can be sued for up to $10,000 per incident. So, for example, Mr. Crow, I would like to have an abortion, and it's a medical procedure. So, as a great friend, you decided to drive me to the clinic. Your neighbor sees you drive me to the clinic, and then they can sue you for $10,000 per incident.
What the heck?
Right? And then what the government says is, we're not enforcing this law. This is a private matter of litigation on a civil court. So therefore, the Supreme Court has no power to regulate how this works.
What the?
And so now what they're trying to do is they're trying to write laws in the same manner as that for guns, right? So you possess a gun and somehow that gun is stolen and you didn't have it locked up like the government says you should have it locked up. Well, now you can be sued for that incident. And anybody that wants to sue you can sue you for that incident, right? It's not, and you're not just capped by one person suing you, right? Let's say your neighbor kid
jump on.
Let's say a neighbor kid breaks into your house, steals your gun that you had sitting on your table.
Yeah.
Right? And then he goes and he kills 5 people. And then all 5 of those parents and your neighbor decide that they're going to sue you because they can, and it's a civil thing, and there's really nothing you can do about it. Right? That's what they're trying to do. However, the problem with this all goes through the same thing is it a law that's on the books that restricts your Second Amendment right? Is there a least restrictive amount of way to do that? And see, it all comes down to the same fact is the government creating a law that allows something to happen. And therefore the Supreme Court, with their current ruling, has made those laws illegal, even though they're going to try to do it anyway. But the problem is it comes to one of those things is because it's not the government doing it, there can't be a like the stay order kind of that stops these from happening.
Mm-hmm.
I believe the courts don't have the right to do that because it's not the government actually inflicting these things. It's individual folks.
Wow.
So this is where it'll get very messy and
yeah.
and it'll be very ugly for a little while. But that's what they're trying to do next,
Wow.
right? And it's always something. And so this is really important, is that before you go and you vote next time, think about what's happening. Think about who's trying to restrict your rights, and make sure that you vote appropriately with how you view your rights. Because I always say this every time we talk about gun rights, is every time you make an argument against the Second Amendment, I can make that same argument against the First Amendment. And the moment you want to take away my Second Amendment rights is the same time the government will take away your First Amendment rights, because it's the same argument. And all I have to say is look at these Germans about how many people were killed by somebody talking. One guy killed a massive amounts of people, and he never fired a gun. He only talked. So if you say nobody ever dies from First Amendment right, from freedom of speech, that's not true. More people have died from speech than any other way, period.
It is the one that gets people more riled up too.
Yeah.
Freedom of speech.
Yeah. So, but the Supreme Court is on a current tear. Gun rights are falling all over the place and are opening up for the next generation of people. And and that's the thing is you know, the real problem is you can't regulate hate. It's not the gun that kills folks. It's not the car that plows into a crowd of people that kill people, right? It's the hate. It's the people driving those things to do that. And that's the whole thing. It's a tool. And in Europe, they don't have guns. So how do people get killed? Well, they have mass stabbing. So you're gonna outlaw knives? That right? It's just an ongoing thing. And for me, I would rather have a pistol on my hip, so if somebody comes at me or my family, then I can protect myself. And
that makes sense. Oh, wow.
And I will always continue to fight for the Second Amendment and the Second Amendment rights, so you too can defend yourself from some psychotic moron running around with a gun. Because, like I said, you just can't regulate hate, and that's the problem. That's the problem, is there's just too much of it.
Yeah, there's too many unknown variables. That's very interesting.
Thank you,
but
Supreme
speaking
Court.
of voting,
thank you.
Too, yeah, the Supreme Court, man, it sounds like they're making some waves.
They are definitely making waves.
Sure. They're starting to do stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was gonna say I know that here, at least locally for me, that we've been going through the nomination ballot or whatever it is. It was time to vote for who you want to move on. So
the primaries.
Yeah, be sure to it's the primaries. There, thank you. So definitely pay attention and
ride that red wave.
And if I can't remember who, I can't remember if it was you, Duck, who shared something with me about some of the Republicans or something down here locally in Utah. But if they're quiet, that's also a red flag sometimes. I had something that came up that there's this Republican he swaps back and forth of what party he wants to be. And if it's a topic that he really doesn't agree with, he either changes the topic or else he doesn't answer the questions because he doesn't want to share his voice. I was like, wow.
Politician.
Typical, yeah. Just
All
if
right.
they're quiet, it's because they don't agree with it.
Don't forget to like the video. Don't forget to comment. Don't forget to share this video. It helps to get out there. We really appreciate it. If you too want to defend your Second Amendment rights, make sure that you let other people see this video. All right. Much love all, but we are out of here.
Thanks, everyone. See you next time. Bye.